Hello everyone, welcome to TESOL 330 Computers in Language Learning Week 3. Today we are focusing on grammar and assessment in call environments. And as you've seen already, we have lots of discussions, reflections, and that's because the areas we discuss in class are generally about choice, design, and critical thinking when it comes to using tech tools for vocabulary instruction like last week and for grammar instruction and testing this week. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so let's begin with some key ideas from Egbert and Charokny Chapter 8, which focuses on assessment in call environments. First, the chapter looks at the difference between summative and formative assessment. Summative assessment is usually at the end of the course, like final exams. Formative, on the other hand, is ongoing, and it informs teaching, like giving feedback during a writing task. The chapter also differentiates between formal and informal assessments. Formal assessments would be standardized tests like IELTS or TOEFL, whereas informal could include in-class peer evaluations or reflective journals. And one important point made in this chapter is that assessment supports call principles only when it is interactive, formative, and authentic. This means, this literally means if you're using tech for assessment purposes, it shouldn't just test for the sake of testing. It should really involve the learner, give them timely feedback, and relate to real-life language use. Another interesting contrast made in this chapter is the contrast between computer-based testing, CBT, and computer adaptive testing. Computer adaptive testing, as the name indicates, adjusts the level of difficulty based on the student responses, which makes them a bit more individualized, but more complex to design. There is also a section in the chapter about reducing test anxiety and the ways we might adopt in order to mitigate students' test anxiety. And this is especially relevant when tech is involved because unfamiliar platforms or formats can make students feel more anxious. Finally, there is the use of rubrics. Rubrics can help provide consistent, clear expectations, and they can be especially useful in tech-mediated peer assessments or self-assessments. So, that was an overview of Chapter 8. The take-home message. The way we assess, the way we implement assessment in our classrooms should align with the principles of call. So not just throwing in a quiz, but thinking about why, how, and what the assessment is actually doing. Before moving on, here is a quick knowledge check for you. According to Egbert and Charokny, to reduce test anxiety, teachers should test computer skills together with language skills. Is that true? False? Or you may say, I can't remember. So please share your response in the chat box, or if you're watching the lecture on YouTube, you may share your response in the comments, please. Well, the correct answer is false, and here is why. As you might remember, authors actually recommend not testing computer skills and language skills at the same time, especially for lower proficiency learners. Why? Because when students are trying to figure out both the tech and the language, it can increase their cognitive load and anxiety. So ideally, learners should already be familiar with the tech tool before they are assessed using them. This is a very important point, and especially when you are designing tasks using tech. You want to reduce stress, not add to it. let's do one more vote. According to Egbert and Shaworkny, they encourage the use of rubrics for L2 assessment. How much do you agree with this statement? Strongly agree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? So again, please share your response in the chat box, or if you're watching this on YouTube, share it in the comments. If you chose one or two, you're definitely aligned with the authors. As you might have read, they strongly support rubrics because rubrics make expectations clearer and give learners a tool to self-assess and reflect. And this is quite important, especially in tech-enhanced environments where peer review is used or automated feedback is used. In such environments, rubrics can add a structure and transparency. So, a quick follow-up. Why do you think rubrics are valuable in call environments? We'll discuss this more in class. I like this quote from chapter 8. Let's read it together. Involving students in developing assessment not only exposes them to more language and content and provides a deeper understanding about expectations for the activity, but it also helps them to develop metacognitive awareness about assessment and to find it authentic. Page 166. And so basically, when students participate in designing or co-constructing assessment, like helping define rubrics or creating sample questions, they're not just passive test takers anymore. They're engaging more deeply with the language. They're also engaging with thinking critically about what good performance looks like. And here's my question for you. How can we implement this idea in our own classroom contexts? Can we think of a task or assessment where students could be involved in shaping the criteria of their own assessment? Maybe it's a writing task, maybe it's a project. Let's brainstorm that together again in the class. Now let's look at some ideas from Haift and Vaitkina, 2017. This text is summarized by Chat PDF. Focus is on grammar instruction using technologies. So I'm going to let you read this text for a few minutes, and we'll discuss more after you're done. There are a few takeaways here. First, technology clearly opens up new opportunities for L2 instruction, but it's not automatic. The instructor's role remains important. They need to be involved in the pedagogy, no doubt. Without thoughtful integration, technology can easily become flashy but not effective. There is also this ongoing debate around explicit versus implicit grammar instruction. Should we teach grammar directly or let learners pick it up through use? Well, the good news is technology can actually support both. It depends how we design the tools and activities. They also emphasize that technology provides a variety of tools, including multimedia, online practice, virtual spaces, so on and so forth. Great stuff, but again, not useful unless aligned with pedagogical goals. And another thing that needs our attention is that tech-based instruction can lead to a range of benefits, like boosting engagement, offering more feedback, and giving learners more autonomy. But this is a big but here. Effective integration depends on carefully considering multiple factors: learners' needs, interests, preferences, pedagogical objectives, and even the limitations of the tech itself. So my question to you is, do you agree? Do you think instructors still play a central role in tech-based grammar instruction? Why? Why not? This is something we'll need to discuss in class again. Okay, let's continue with some more technical concepts from the same article. Haift and Vaidkina begin by clarifying that the old debate between implicit and explicit grammar teaching is less of an issue. It's more about how we balance them rather than picking sides. Then they outline 4 major technology-based pedagogies. First, tutorial call, which is more traditional and focuses on drill and practice type of grammar software. Next is intelligent call, or iCall, where technology adapts to the learner's responses using AI, artificial intelligence. The third is data-driven learning, or DDL, which is all about learners working with real language data, like searching corpora to notice patterns. And finally, we have computer-mediated communication, or CMC, which emphasizes authentic communication, often in online forums or chat platforms or similar things. A recurring theme in this in this article perhaps is learning autonomy, because they argue that, for example, corpora can support this by helping learners explore grammar autonomously. They also talk about input enhancement. That's where instructors or systems highlight parts of the input to help learners notice and remember the input, the target input. This might involve things like bolding, underlining, adding translations, or even audio cues. Repetition is also important, especially spaced repetition, which is mentioned as a way to grasp and internalize grammar input. Finally, the authors highlight that feedback in call is generally positive, but we still don't have clear answers about how often it should be given, when the best time is, or how much feedback is ideal. Now let's move on to grammar specifically, especially how call can be used to support grammar instruction. This slide gives you 2 broad approaches to teaching grammar: syllabus-based grammar teaching and goal-based grammar instruction. In the syllabus-based approach, you teach grammar topics in a predetermined sequence, like adjective clauses in week 5, followed by conditionals in week 6. It's structured and it follows a grammar syllabus very closely. On the other hand, a grammar-based approach is more functional. Instead of starting with a grammar point, you will start with the communicative goal and then introduce the grammar needed to accomplish that goal. For example, if the goal is to make future plans, students might learn the structure be plus verb ing plus future time word, like in I'm meeting them tomorrow, which is like 100% planned future. Both approaches have values, and both can be supported through technology. However, it's important to recognize that goal-based approaches often align more naturally with task-based or communicative call tools. All right, let's take a step back and look at what Ellis, 1998, referred to as the fundamentals of grammar teaching. There are 4 pillars here, the first of which is structured input. Structured input is about designing the input in a way that draws the learner's attention to the target grammatical forms. It's not all about exposure, it's about structured, meaningful exposure where learners notice the form in context. Next is explicit instruction, which is a more traditional teaching method where rules, grammatical rules are explained clearly. It doesn't mean that learners are to memorize rules only, but that they understand what and the why behind the grammar. Next comes production practice. After learners understood the rules, first after they were exposed to the input and they understood the rules, they need chances to use grammar themselves. This could be through speaking, writing, or any meaningful output activity. Finally, there is corrective feedback. Learners need to know whether they are using the language correctly. Feedback can be immediate or delayed, implicit or explicit. Whatever form it is, it should help learners move toward more accurate language usage. And that brings us to the next slide, which is call-driven means for teaching grammar. So here we want to discuss three categories in terms of call-driven means: discourse-based instruction, form-focused instruction, and interaction itself. We can think of call-driven grammar instruction through these three broad approaches. First, let's talk about discourse-based instruction. In this approach, grammar is taught in context. It depends on the importance of that grammar point in a specific communicative situation. This is typically supported through implicit instruction and structured input. Second, we have form-focused instruction. Here the focus is on drawing learners' attention directly towards grammar forms. And that might include language production tasks, explicit instruction, corrective feedback, pattern analysis, and learning about grammatical relations. This is more deliberate for sure, and analytical. And the third is interaction, which involves turn-taking either between a student and a computer or between the students themselves. Think of chatbots, for example, or collaborative online tasks. What's important here is that grammar learning happens during communication and interaction. And this is where we see what's called language-related episodes, or LREs. These are moments where learners stop and talk about the language itself within the task. Okay, so now that we have seen the principles and approaches, here are some practical tips for implementing grammar teaching with call. These are the tips you're already familiar with in the vocabulary week. We've talked about it. Learner fit, student to computer interaction, student to student interaction, evaluation, and a strategy development. Now we want to direct our attention towards grammar instruction, utilizing and implementing all these tips. First, learner fit. Well, you need to make sure the grammar you're teaching is level appropriate and relevant. So choose call tools or materials that align well with learners' needs, goals, and preferences. Second is student-computer interaction. The technology you choose should allow learners to engage in discovery, analysis, and production, not just passive watching for sure. So look for platforms or apps that encourage hands-on interaction. Third is student-student interaction. Even with technology, we can create tasks where learners engage with each other. So they can collaborate, engage in negotiation of meaning, and co-construction of knowledge. Think of discussion forums, breakout rooms, in case you're teaching online, or peer reviews. Fourth, include evaluation in your grammar teaching practices. Call tools often allow for quick and easy assessments. So leverage that. Try to use them to track learners' progress, give immediate feedback, and summarize performance. And finally, support strategy development. Help learners build habits like using online corpora, such as COCA. In a separate session, we'll talk more about COCA. or grammar checkers to reflect on their own use of grammar and to self-correct over time. Let them become independent, autonomous grammar learners. So in summary, COL isn't just about flashy tools again. It's about a smart integration that supports structured input, output practice, and feedback within meaningful contexts. Now let's start with tip number 1. When you're designing or selecting grammar activities utilizing technology, especially COL, it's not just about the tech itself. You need to make sure the target grammar is appropriate for your learners. Now, how do you decide that? Well, there are a few important factors to consider, as you see in the diagram here. First, think about the difficulty of the grammar forms in relation to your learners' current level and their needs. Are they ready for that structure? Second, look at the requirements for actually producing those forms. Do they need a lot of cognitive effort to produce a grammatical pattern? Or do they need prior exposure or scaffolding? And finally, think about the degree of explicitness. Does the material make the grammar point crystal clear, or is it more implicit? And what's appropriate for your learners? So the bottom line is good COL materials aren't one size fits all. They need to be tailored to your learners. And that brings us to tip number 2, which is about making the interaction with the computer meaningful and engaging. So don't just give students a bunch of multiple choice grammar questions and call it a day. Instead, try to create a cycle that includes teaching, discovery, analysis, and production. We can break this down into 3 phases. First, respond. Learners interact by answering questions and receiving evaluation, maybe immediate feedback. Then, identify and analyze. They reflect on the patterns. What are they seeing? Can they discover a rule? And finally, this is where they use the grammar themselves and hopefully get feedback here as well. So again, you're moving from input to analysis to output. So input, analysis, output. And the computer supports this entire cycle. That's the kind of tech-enhanced interaction we are aiming for. Now let's go to tip number 3, which is about getting learners to interact with each other, not just the computer. Grammar tasks should encourage communication. So we can look at this from 2 angles. Talking about grammar and talking using grammar. Let's focus on talking about grammar. This could be collaborative analysis, peer explanations, noticing forms together. It helps raise students' grammatical awareness in general. Below that, we have talking using grammar. This is where learners use target structure in a real communicative context. The grammar in this part becomes part of what they need to accomplish the task. Both types of interaction, talking about grammar and talking using grammar, are important indeed. So when you're designing grammar activities, try to think about how you can build interaction into the task, whether it's through discussion, collaboration, or communicative goals. This would help move grammar from something abstract into something meaningful. Let's talk feedback. Tip number 4. Feedback for sure is a pillar of grammar teaching that COL can actually enhance if used wisely. First, it stands to reason that grammatical accuracy doesn't develop in a vacuum, right? Learners need guidance, so feedback matters. Second, we're talking about explicit detailed feedback, not just a red X or green check mark. Learners can actually benefit when they know what went wrong and why. And what is the tech role here? technology can actually scale that feedback. Many platforms now offer individualized written feedback, especially for writing or grammar production production tasks. This helps support learners at their own pace and allows for personalized learning journeys. So, when designing or choosing call tools, look for ones that don't just correct, but also explain. Last but not least, tip number 5, which focuses on helping learners develop strategies to learn grammar directly from texts they find online, especially through explicit practice and inductive learning. So instead of just giving your learners grammar rules or isolated sentences, you want to guide them through authentic texts and help them learn the grammar within those texts. And how do we do that? First, we prompt learners to go beyond the surface meaning of a sentence or utterance. And this is called form-function mapping, which is basically about connecting the grammatical form with its communicative function. Next, we want our learners to understand the meaning that the grammar itself is conveying, not just guess based on context or vocabulary. For example, recognizing that a sentence is in the passive voice and interpreting its function, like emphasizing the action over the actor. And over time, this leads to less reliance on their background knowledge or individual word meanings. Doing so, learners begin to process grammar more independently and critically within a context, within a text. And this tip is really about making learners active grammar detectives. Learners who are able to read, able to notice, able to internalize grammatical patterns from real life materials they encounter online. So we've just talked about helping learners make connections between grammar and meaning through explicit strategies, particularly moving beyond surface level understanding to more form-function mapping. Now, let's change gears a bit and look at how this idea of explicit input and learner noticing plays out in data-driven learning, especially through the use of corpora and concordancers. One of the most powerful tools for encouraging learner noticing and inductive learning is what we call data-driven learning, DDL. Their rationale here is quite simple. Language learning isn't just about absorbing words. It requires explicit learning of knowledge. In other words, learners need lots of input, and not just any input. The input should be rich, authentic, and frequent. And that's why we use corpora. In DDL, learners are encouraged to engage directly with real language data. And this approach is almost 100% learner-centered and supports autonomous learning, meaning that students become researchers of language, not just consumers. Now let's look at 4 key principles that guide this approach. First, languages are acquired through exposure to a specific linguistic exemplars, like real examples in context, not just textbook definitions. Second, grammar and vocabulary are intertwined. They're not separate, and this is known as lexical grammar. Third, learners aren't passive. They have choices among possible grammatical forms. And DDL gives them the evidence to make informed decisions. And fourth, input needs to be salient. And what does that mean? It simply means language needs to stand out so learners can notice and analyze it. To support all this, we use tools called concordancers. These tools search large language corpora and bring back real examples of how words are used in real contexts. They help make the language visible, patterned, and meaningful. A concordance is basically a list of all examples of a search term that you would find in a corpus. So if you look up the word like depend, the software will give you dozens or even hundreds of real-world uses of that word, often lined up in a column for easy comparison. And you can also filter your search, like you would like to see depend in academic versus non-academic contexts. And here is what it actually looks like in practice. This is KWIC, keyword in context display, generated using a concordancer called ConCapp. You can see the word depend is shown in bold in the middle with the surrounding text on both sides. This allows learners to focus on the word's behavior, how it's used, what comes before and after, and what kind of grammar it tends to co-occur with. This kind of display is super helpful for helping students notice patterns. For example, they might see that depend often appears with the preposition on, or that it's followed by clause in many cases. At the bottom, I've added a few links for those of you who want to try some of these concordancers out on your own. We'll go over these together later, but feel free to explore if you're curious. All right, let's build on what we've just seen with the concordancer example using the keyword depend. This slide is asking what can we learn from this analysis. As you look at these lines, you'll notice the word depend consistently appears with certain prepositions like on or upon, and often in specific grammatical or semantic environments. This is a great example of how KWIC output gives learners real language data. And it's not about definitions per se, it's about patterns of use. So what are some observations you might make here? Again, these are some questions that we can reflect on in the class. So feel free again to share your responses in the chat box, or if you're watching this on YouTube, share your responses in the comments. Some more questions. How's depend typically used? Are there consistent structures or contexts? These are the kinds of reflective questions learners might ask to deepen their understanding. Now let's pivot to collocations, language learning through frequency and patterns. This slide presents a question. I saw a movie yesterday, or I have seen a movie yesterday. Which one feels right? By using a wild card, not a flashcard, a wild card like open quote, star, a movie yesterday, end quote, you can investigate what native speakers actually say, and you can do it through Google search box. This type of search reveals common collocational patterns, and it's a great way for learners to figure out what expressions are more natural or more frequent. Here's the sample output. And you can also use ChatGPT and make a cross comparison between Google generated output in terms of collocations and ChatGPT generated output. So this method reinforces the idea that again, exposure to authentic usage and not just grammar rules can inform better language intuition. And that brings us to the following question. What kind of learning are we engaging with here? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds, go over the items and share your response in the chat box or in the comments on YouTube. Okay. Data-driven learning is the right answer. This is where we actually see the real authentic learning happening. It's listed by the way, alongside other approaches like intelligent call or computer-mediated communication. But what makes DDL unique is that it asks learners to take a detective role. You as a learner are not just absorbing input, you're hunting for patterns, making hypotheses, and verifying them with real data. So this is a real powerful research-based way to promote learner autonomy and deeper learning. Now let's ground this idea in a real-world application. This is a case of a journalist who used the word regime to describe his government. The government deemed the term insulting and arrested the journalist. The journalist's defense: he said the term regime just means government, according to dictionary definitions. But is that how the word is actually used in real-world discourse? That's what we'll try to explore using corpus tools. So here's the question. Who do you think won the case? Was it the government, the journalist, or was the case dismissed for lack of evidence? Now, before we reveal the answer, I want you to imagine that you were on the jury. Your task is to assess the case, but not based on gut feeling or just dictionary definitions. Instead, try to evaluate this using a corpus analysis. And let's see how the term regime is actually used across multiple real-world examples. Here is the KWIC display for the word regime. Please take a look at the contexts and some questions you may consider. What are some patterns you may notice? Does the word tend to co-occur with negative, authoritarian, or militaristic contexts? Are these usages neutral, or do they carry certain connotations? This is the type of critical reflection that corpus tools provide. Rather than relying solely on definitions, learners and teachers can analyze how words actually function in authentic usage. And that can be really helpful for both teaching and social understanding. All right, guys, that is the end of lecture 3. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.